Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known on this Monday, January 24th, 2022. Many of you likely have heard or seen the social media posts that begin with, "I don't know who needs to hear this." Well, today we are discussing baby mamas, ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, and those who are poisoning their children against the estranged man in their lives. How do you foster a relationship when the ex is sabotaging the relationship with the children? We discussed with licensed mental health counselor Mr. Sonny Etienne, family therapist Ron C. Osborne-Williams, Black fathers Dwayne, Blyth, Kenny Trader, and clinical trauma specialist Cory George. But first, let us bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis is traveling, so we want you to make sure to say good morning.
Good morning, STACY Brown, and thank you on this Monday morning on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, current which is chair. We represent 230 African-American-owned newspapers and media companies all across the United States, and we are pleased to be involved with this important topic, Black fathers.
Absolutely. Dr. Chavis, first, the news headlines this morning. It's a sad headline. The Black press of America extends its most profound condolences to actor and director Regina King, whom we learned over the weekend lost her son, Ian Alexander Jr., by suicide. He was just 26 years old and certainly the light of her life. In a statement, Regina King said, "Our family is devastated at the deepest level by the loss of Ian. He is such a bright light who cared so deeply about the happiness of others. Our family asks for respectful consideration during this private time." Alexander was a musician and DJ and released a new single, Green Eyes, on January the 7th. He had performances scheduled in Los Angeles later this month. He was Regina King's only child, whom she shared with her ex-husband, record producer Ian Alexander Sr. This is absolutely beyond tragic. Regina King, hearts definitely go out to her. She has the star has risen so dramatically after all the hard work she's put in, and we certainly think about her on this Monday, January 24th, and going further. Regina King, we think about you in the Black press. Also this morning, a Kansas district attorney announced that he will be filing no charges in connection with the death of Cedric Lofton, a Black teenager who died in law enforcement custody. He cited the state's robust stand your ground law. Lofton, who was just 17, died in September after being handcuffed and restrained in the prone position, meaning lying face down, during a struggle with staff and corrections employees at a juvenile facility. Sedgwick County District Attorney Mark Bennett said at a news conference that the employees involved acted in self-defense under the stand your ground law because the team resisted and struggled with correction staff, and they therefore are immune from prosecution. Lofton family lawyers disagreed, of course, saying officers took his breath away by putting Lofton in the prone position. And they said Bennett's decision is another instance of no accountability for the death of an unarmed Black teen. An autopsy report found in December that Lofton's cause of death was complications of cardiopulmonary arrest sustained after physical struggle while restrained in the prone position. The medical examiner ruled that the death was indeed a homicide. Just don't get these stand your ground laws when this young man was handcuffed in a prone position, and yet they had the right to kill him because of stand your ground. Wow. Also in the news this morning, a bill backed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis that would prohibit Florida's public schools and private businesses from making people feel, quote unquote, discomfort or quote unquote guilt based on their race, sex, or national origin, received first approval by the state Senate's Education Committee. The Republican-controlled committee approved the bill with 6 Republican senators in favor of the bill and 3 Democratic senators opposed to it. Although the bill is named, quote unquote, individual freedom, it does not mention critical race theory. The term is used in the attached bill that was given to senators. DeSantis also referred to critical race theory when he announced the proposed legislation at a media event in December, saying the proposed law would help keep critical race theory out of the schools and out of the workplace, calling it, quote, a state-sanctioned racism that creates a hostile work environment. Under Florida Department of Education rules that took effect last June, critical race theory cannot be taught in schools. Again, Dr. Chambers, I see you there. I saw a little shaking of the head. This is absurd. And we don't have audio on Dr. Chavis, but it's, again, they're pushing something that really does not exist in public schools, as we well know. Well, this morning, the topic is Black fathers. In 2020, reportedly, there were about 1.23 million Black families with a single father living in the United States. This is an increase from 1990, when there were 472,000 reported Black families with a single father in the U.S. With those statistics so alarming, there's an unsettling reality, and that is that there's nothing quite as devastating as having an ex-wife, fiance, or girlfriend who tries to turn your children against you. Let's talk this morning with Dwayne Blyth and Kenny Trader. Good morning, Dwayne and Kenny. How are you?
Hey, Stacy, how you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Great. So let's get into this. There are so many cases. We see the stats, right? Where the growing number of absentee, if you will, or out of the home, let's say out of the home Black fathers, and it's going up and up. But something unsettling is happening, and we want you to speak to it. The fact that the kids are being told awful things about the father that may or may not be true.
Well, I'll start off. I mean, I think in my case, my daughter is only 2 years old, but pretty much what's going on is because of the false allegations that my ex has lobbied against me. The court tends to kind of favor her, and what happens is, they give her a lot of power, and I'm not able to really spend time with my daughter. First of all, she took my daughter against my consent to a different state. And I have to travel to that state, which is very far from here, about twice a month, and it's just very, very difficult circumstances because of the allegations that she's lobbied against me. They give her all the power, so she's able to dictate when I see my kid, which is not often.
Yeah. So whether or not, the relationship obviously dissolved,
right?
But the mother now wants to keep the child away. We see that in many cases. We have so many problems, Black fathers, so many obstacles to overcome. Why does it come to this? I mean, what your experience again? Why does it come to this? And both of you can come into this conversation.
Well, in my story is not quite the same. My children are a little older. I was married 18 years, so my youngest was around 7 at the time, and my oldest was about 16. So when we started the process of dissolving the relationship, she started to live her life, and she was involving other individuals in the dynamic of the family. And I had a problem with that because our relationship wasn't completely severed yet. So my children were confused in the status of, well, that's daddy, but there's this other individual involved. And it just created a tug of war situation that I think she didn't process properly, which created a lot of friction in the dynamics of the family. And it pitted the kids in a position where they had to make a decision. And it should never be in the children's decision process. They should live their lives and be happy knowing that they do have a mother and a father.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so how do we get to this point? We know that the relationships end, right? In some cases, they don't end as great as you'd like them to end, a clean break, if you will. But when there are children involved, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir. So instead of just preaching to the choir, let me ask you, brothers, when your children are involved, what are your children saying to you? What do they want from you? Because it becomes a situation where now the child is like, well, daddy's not around, and what mommy's saying must be true.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what needs to happen is, there needs to be other persons involved, like third party third parties that come in and kind of help regulate things. When you have another party, let's say that the other parent hates you, doesn't want you to be a part of their kid's life, that bias does hurt you. So if that person isn't really able to regulate their feelings and so forth, the courts have to stop rubber stamping these situations, and they have to bring in a third party. Now, they'll probably say they don't have the money, that every situation that comes in has a bunch of conflict, but what's happening is these children are suffering, and so you need a third party. You need somebody other than the two parties, settling things, especially when one party is just not happy and they're acting hateful and vengeful.
Well, I just want to piggyback on Kendrick's statement. The only problem that I have was who determines who that third party is, because as we already know, the court system is typically geared or slighted to the woman's side 9 times out of 10. So where do you find an intermediary that can step in that is unbiased, neutral to both sides, and arbitrates 50-50, if you will, that both sides can get equal access to the children, and the children have the benefits of both parents, so to speak. So that third party is just always, where does it come from? Because I have my reservations and doubts with the court system, because they've always been slided, unfortunately, to the woman's side of things.
Well, let me ask you this, because Angela Connolly, one of our viewers, brings up this point here. She says, soul search before you sleep with these people. Are we as men, and we're going to keep this as a black man discussion, are we checking these women out for more than just, a big butt and a smile?
I mean, I think I've heard, I forget, he's a minister. You should ask questions. Definitely ask as many questions. From a young man, I learned there is no such thing as a wrong question, right? So you ask as much to uncover as much. Now, you may not get all the truth, but at least it'll point you in the right direction. So to your point, I think we should definitely do more due diligence before we lay down and create relationships. And unfortunately, I think in the black community especially, that we have too many women who were raised in a single parent household. So I grew up, fortunately, with a 2-parent household till my father passed away, and I was well into my late 40s when that happened. So I think there are so many people in our community that are raised in a single household, so they don't know what it really entails to work through problems and fight for the relationship. It's as soon as there's an issue or a problem, they're ready to bolt out the door. And there was a statistic I learned when I was going through my divorce process that first time marriages end in a 50% divorce rate. You think you found the next woman in your life that you like and you want to spend the rest of your life with. Second time marriages end in a higher divorce rate at 75%. And then if you do it a third time, so you're thinking the third time is the charm, I got it right, those relationships end at an 85% divorce rate. So somewhere along the line, there's some disconnect somewhere, because I don't think we are healing and processing properly to move forward in lives, to be productive as parents, as adults, and as black people in the world.
Well, let's back up though. You're already into the divorce. So let's talk about, again, going back to the original question about picking them, how sleeping with them in the first place. are we really looking into what type of person this is? And it seems to be vice versa, right? The woman should be looking into what type of man, but what we need to do. I mean, we've seen this. You talked about the second marriage and the third marriage, but what we need to do here, isn't it that we need to evaluate more closely who we jump into bed with?
Well, I think you do, but you have to know what to actually look for. There's some very coy people out there. There's some very talented people. I think sometimes people can kind of, learn you, and they can kind of, tailor their behavior to what you like. So I think asking the right questions, and the other thing I would add is that when you see these red flags, you've got to stop. I mean, that's one of the things that I didn't do very well. There were certain red flags that I saw that I just kind of glossed over. And I do think in, my case, I was more so blinded by the fact that I was having a child with this person. And, I was in my 40s, my first child. I grew up with both parents in the home. So I wanted to give my child that. So there were certain things I thought about, I wanted to talk about. I wanted to bring in a third party, i.e. a counselor, a pastor, somebody. This person really didn't want that, but their profile looked good. This was a high net worth person. I did well in business. It made sense to me.
Right.
But once you're in that web, once you've put that ring on, sometimes that mask fell off, and in my case, that mask fell off, and it's been a challenge ever since.
So how soon, and for both of you, how soon did that mask fall off? When did you first start to see some signs that this is not the person I thought she was?
I would probably say within the first 30 days. Once we moved in together, and granted, we had a lot of stresses. We were new parents. We were newlyweds. I think she had a family member going through something. I allowed them to move in. So we had a lot of external factors come in, but those external factors bearing down, it brought out who she really was. And it also showed me a lot about who I am.
And you as well. What about you? What the first signs? When did you see the first signs?
Very first sign that I noticed is when we were having a conversation about relationships and the longevity of relationships and a family. And she said to me that and I'll never forget this quote. She said, when my mother passed away, because her parents were divorced when she was about 6, her father not passed away. He remarried and moved on. But she said when her mother died when she was 16 years old, so she looked after herself basically from 16 on, put herself through college. So like the brother Kendrick said, she was very on paper, like, wow, she's dynamic. She got it going on. She's moving and shaking, and she's about it. But then she said to me that she prayed, the hardest prayer she ever prayed to God was that she would never allow herself to fall in love and be hurt by someone the way she felt when she lost her mother. Wow. That was clearly, and that was before we got married. And I got married when I was 23, she was about 24. So that right there should have been a red flag that I should have paid very close attention to, that she was attractive, smart, funny, very cool. That right there should have been paramount to me. And I ignored the signs, and we were able to last for 18 years, thankfully, and we have 2 children from it. But that right there should have let me know that she would have never allowed herself to be vulnerable to a true relationship like that.
And so now the kids are involved. And so the kids are involved. You guys, I've experienced it, the breakup, right? And with kids involved. And so at this point, now they're being told, oh, daddy's no good, daddy's this. What are some of the, let's be real, some of the more hurtful things you've heard, and how have you been able to kind of help your kids through that? What are some of the more hurtful things you've heard that she said about you, and how have you been able to help your kids to work through that?
Well, for me, one of the most hurtful things is that I'm unaffectionate, that I'm not very caring, I'm not very involved. And from day one, when my daughter was born, I've always, especially for a girl, I might not be the most touchy-feely type of dad, but I've always been there and I've always made sure that they were a priority. Then having a second child, which was my son, again, it's a little bit different, the relationship between a father-daughter than a father-son. But again, as a young black male, I had to lay down certain foundations. I want him to be successful. I want both of them to be successful. And I want them to work hard and do what is right in this world. So just because my love language is different than yours does not make me out to be a bad guy. But I always remember hearing, just whispers that, well, you know how your father is, and you know how he treats me the same way, but the love that you have for your spouse is going to be always totally different than the love that you have for your child, at least in my book.
Yeah. And Kenny?
Yeah, because Ariella is so young, there's not a lot that she's comprehending, but what she does comprehend is that she's not getting a lot of time with her father. I'm a person of faith, and that's my faith in God has been one of the things that have really kept me strong. And I just pray that the Lord would keep the bond that I have with my 2-year-old intact, because the science does not support it. A child's brain is fully developed 80% by the time a child is 2. A child's brain is 90% developed by the time that child is 5. So if she's not getting much time with me, how do you foster that connection? And so what's been most hurtful is that, through just lies, the court sided with her, the other party, that is, and, gave her the power to, pretty much dictate when I see my child. So in that case, because again, I've been dealing with somebody that has not been very happy with me. I mean, that just comes down to like maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, and I have to travel over 1,000 miles. So
wait, so let me stop you for one quick second, not to cut you off. Well, yeah, I guess sure. I did cut you, but she's not happy with you as her lover or husband or whatever. What does that have to do with the kids?
It has nothing to do with it, and that's the thing that is most hurting, because you try to get them to understand that it's about the kid at this point. I believe every individual, has a right to have a mother and a father. So that's the thing that is most hurtful, because I have a relationship with my 2-year-old. Like, she knows her father. Just last week, she said, "I love you, Daddy." But she sees me over the last 2 years, maybe an average of 4 hours a day when she does see me, Yeah.
Crazy. I want to just quickly, before we bring on the experts, just want to address one of our comments in the stream here. We are only hearing, I can't pronounce your first name, but the last name is CCEE, is saying we are only hearing one side of the story here. That might be true, but we are focusing on the children. And yes, we would love to have the mothers come on to talk about this as well, to get that other side, as you say. But we thought it important to talk to the Black fathers. Black fathers have been demonized forever. And so here we are talking to these gentlemen about their experiences. And we know it happens, as one of the brothers pointed out, right, that in more than 90% of the cases in court, without even hearing what is going on in the house, a court will say the mother has the custody, whether we like it or not. That's just the way it is, unless there is something really, really, really serious, say some sort of child abuse going on. But getting back to it, Dwayne and Kenny, so where exactly are you now? You mentioned something, Kenny, and Dwayne, you can talk about this too. You mentioned something that I thought was interesting and made me think of this, your commentary, that our mindset, I guess Dwayne was saying it too about the second and third marriage, but our mindset what happens after you've experienced this? At some point, you are going to, if you haven't already, you're going to move on like she's moved on. She may, have another husband. You may have another wife. But isn't there trauma involved? And I guess that's more for the experts. But I want to hear about how you guys feel at this moment about moving forward.
Well, Stacey, let me just say this quickly to the person who made a comment about it being both sides. Absolutely right. There are both sides of the story. But what I tend to look at is factual basis, right? What are the facts? You know what I mean? Because each side is different. There's my version, and then there's theirs. But there's also the situation whereas what's happening with the child? How much custody does the other parent have versus the custody that I have? I don't have a criminal background. Why is it that she has 99% custody and I have less than 1%? That's the facts of it. So, I mean, whether I'm the worst father in the world or not, that should never happen.
Yeah, and Dwayne, your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. Like I said, when I brought it up earlier, like the court system is always favored 9 times out of 10 to the woman's side. So it's very almost rare you hear a man saying he has full custody of the children. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where that started, but that definitely has to be revamped and reset so that there is balance. Because again, without a balance, I think the child is the person or the individuals that suffer. Because again, I grew up in a 2-parent household, so there were aspects and characteristics that I learned from my mom. There were aspects and characteristics that I learned from my dad, and that made me, in my opinion, become a more well-rounded individual. But when you just get one side of the story all the time, there is some sort of it changes the dynamics, and then we're going into this cycle decade after decade. Because I mean, again, in slavery, I'm going back to over 400 years. We had no choice, right? Slave masters broke up the household. There was nothing we could do about it. But now we have a choice in the matter. We have a say, but it's still going back to this split up the home. One person keeps the child, and that other person is just, a insignificant part. Going back to what Kendrick was saying, like, he doesn't have a criminal background. I didn't have a criminal background.
Right.
I'm not abusive. I'm not physical. So why does the court system immediately just side with the mother? Somewhere there has to be a voice that changes that.
Yeah,
and until that change occurs, we're going to just continue and continue and continue down this path where at the end of the day, the child suffers.
Hey, Stacey, let me make one last point on this, and then we can move on. And that is, I've had this discussion a lot, and basically, my idea is this: I feel like fathers should get in front of Congress and talk about these issues. I have met so many people, men and women, but mainly men, who have talked about how when they've been in these divorces, that once one of the other parties, makes some type of allegation or whatever it is, that they completely side with that other party. And it's mainly women versus men. And again, I love women. I'm not a woman basher. I'm just talking about what I have seen. And my whole rationale is, if Congress can listen to baseball players talk about steroids, then let's talk about this epidemic of men being split from their kids.
Yeah, wow.
It is mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. I mean, I've met so many men who spent a lot of money. We always hear about the fathers, black fathers, that is, that are not there for their kids. But there is another side to that coin. There's the black father who I love my kid more than anything. Would do anything for her. Why is it that I have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I have, just to be a part of my kid, when she has a constitutional right to have both her mother and her father? So right. I'm not just about talking about the problems. I want answers to these issues, and I think Congress should get involved.
Well, let's bring on the experts. Licensed mental health counselor, Mr. Sonny Etienne, mentor, educator, and therapist, Ron C. Osborne-Williams. Good morning, guys. I'm not getting audio.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
You've heard this discussion, and we're going to bring both of them back shortly. But give me an overview. I mean, you sat back, you heard it. What's your overview? First of all, let's start there.
Well, I like to say, first of all, but the person that said that is two sides to a story, we should not minimize these men's stories. So as soon as someone says, "Oh, there's another side," it's an attempt to try to water down their experiences, and so we should never do that, because that's why we're in this space right now. So I urge people just to listen with an open mind. My first take is, I'm just glad that my parents did not partake in that when they split up, because my parents split, and I think it was 4. And my mother always said this thing, and she said, "I may not like your dad, but I want you to form your own relationship with him based on how he treats you." And so if I didn't like my dad, or I was angry at him, it was because of our relationship, and it wasn't because of what my mother said. It wasn't because of what anyone said, but my experience. So it's unfortunate that the children don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, and so let's focus on the children here, because that's the goal here, right? Is the children making sure the children have a relationship with both parents. So how do we do that when the situation is volatile?
First, I mean, I think it's a great ambition for a brother to think about going to Congress. But it's probably not going to ever happen. There is a systematic, as we have seen in history, to just, not to establish and have the Black family be established. The number one way you're able to do that is by getting rid of the Black father. So, I mean, that's a big component of not having Black families.
And so, okay, so we again, so with the kids involved here, they're being told, and we heard the experiences, right, with Dwayne, and we've heard the experiences of other people, right? The kids are being told, "Oh, daddy's a bum," and so when he sees that child, once on the weekends, every other week, or whatever the setup is. Not only does he have to do whatever he had planned to do with the child, maybe take him to the park, to a ball game or something, but he has to work with that child. Doesn't he have to work with that child to try and get that child to understand he's not a bum?
Well, I would say that, that as a parent, just be consistent with your character, because we can't change the mother. But unfortunately, it is trauma. It's a type of trauma. So, for example, if the father and child had a great relationship and all of a sudden that changes, that's traumatic for both parties. But not only the child, but also the father. And also, we see this a lot, and unfortunately, this behavior, it can have a root in narcissism. But not only that, we also have to look at how was the mother's relationship fostered in her own family, meaning what was modeled for her in terms of anger management and and conflict, if and with her own parents, because sometimes we're only doing what we know best, and sometimes what we know best doesn't serve us best. So that's why it's always good in the dating process, now that I've learned, because I'm a 48-year-old person dating now, is I want to know about your family. I want to know about how you guys handle conflict. I want to know about how your parents operated outside of the marriage, because then that's what you're going to bring into this relationship. So it's fair to say that we should look at the history and try to see patterns of what may manifest later on.
But no,
go ahead.
But this trauma is so unique in the aspect that most of the time when you hear the trauma is a lot of times the mother will express the trauma that herself and the child is going through. And then what turns around is there is never identification of the trauma that the father goes through. This idea that fathers don't care or don't want to be involved with their children, or that they are not giving their children what they need, is a fundamental misnomer when we think about it, because fathers, as much as we believe that children need their fathers, the fathers need their children. And we sometimes discount that in a large majority and say, well, you don't have to worry about a father. You don't need a father, because mothers and children have been such enmeshed together in a way where sometimes mothers say my emotionality is the child's emotionality. And the tie that motherhood has to womanness, the being a woman, sometimes plays a role that if you're not this kind of mother, you won't be a good woman. You can't be these things. But that's not connected sometimes to the fathers that we find out. People are willing to accept fathers to not be around and not to do things. And it becomes this narrative that, oh, don't worry about a father. But one of the things that we want to really express to fathers, if you even are in situations where you're not able to really get with your child at this time, you don't stop being a father. And I tell my guys and fathers in our program all the time that, listen, you may not have access to your child for the first 18 years, but your child has so many years that they're still going to need you as a father, probably in the 20s when it's even more important to have that father figure. So you have to be persevering to continue to try to keep that relationship, regardless of what happens, because eventually kids grow their own development, their own mindset of what's going on. They see what's happening, and then they'll come back. You have to be ready to come to them and take whatever has been the hit. But it's important because, remembering, you need your children as much as they need you.
Yeah, and so let me ask you both. In the Black community, especially, men are targeted today more than ever before. There are situations where angry moms have called the police, making serious but false accusations. Shouldn't mothers, regardless of their anger, take a breath and realize that she's putting their children's Black father in grave danger, because any encounter between Black men and law enforcement could end up really, really bad?
Absolutely. It can be traumatizing, because even a person like me who has no record, if I'm stopped at a traffic stop, I get anxious. So just imagine if someone is being called and is told that they're abusive. So unfortunately, unfortunately in law enforcement, their first thing is, oh, this person may be violent, may have a weapon. Let me come prepared for war. But if that's not true, then yes, you're putting that, but not just the man in danger, but the child may witness this as well. And now it's like it's a double whammy. But what I didn't mention before is, oftentimes this also happens when the parent makes the child their emotional spouse. So they're telling the child what the dad did to them. They're telling the child how it made them feel, and the child's loyalty is split. And as a previous young man said, but the child was forced to make a choice. So if I am my mother's emotional spouse and you hurt my mother and I love my mother, then I probably won't like you. So so it's very clear that we should always understand that it's not even a child's mind, but a person's mind is not fully developed until they're 30 years old. So at a young age, they don't have the coping skills to make sense of what they're hearing. They can't decide, so mom is just doing, stuff that she shouldn't be doing. So a child is going to model whatever that parent does, because that's what our job is. Our job is to model for our children how we deal with conflict, how we handle our feelings. And if that's mismanaged, that can really harm the child down the road into their own relationships.
Oh, go ahead. You wanted to jump in.
In a large majority of my work, we developed this in my doctoral thesis. I developed this theory of the child rearing spectrum, because when working with a number of fathers and fathers in different capacities, because a lot of times we hear a lot of the negatives about fathers who are not involved, and we don't ever hear a lot about there's a lot of fathers who are good fathers who are with their children every day, who still live with their wives, are their partners, and have good relationships. And so a lot of times we're hearing a lot of time on only one end of the spectrum, where it hasn't worked, where a lot of times, depending on how this child has been established and have been created, that they're falling on one end of the spectrum. And I think that one of the unique things we have to begin to do, and also understand this, is also becomes another trauma for children, in the instance of if they go to a school and all their counterpart, all their students and everybody else has a two-parent home with a father, this child then gets a complex about, well, I don't have a father. How do I have a father? And then how does that, you begin to see tension happen within the home. So this is such a complex when you want to really look at the dynamics of it. But a lot of people are willing to chop it up to, oh, you know what? Men are dogs, or women are fast. It's all this criticism that we have instead of really confronting what some of the true issues are in developing children. Because there is this idea that we go from being a child, childhood, boyhood, manhood, husbandhood, fatherhood. But a lot of times we're skipping from sometimes childhood to fatherhood. And we miss some major steps that are needed to really be able to be the type of father, or even be involved with the type of person that could be a co-parent to us. And so we're missing some of those vital steps and just saying that, hey, my insecurity about this, I'm going to make it work for me, instead of saying, how do I look inside myself to make myself better? And a lot of people are willing to just fight. They're in this fight mode. And I tell fathers, don't be in a fight mode, be in an advocate mode. Advocate for your child. Because the word fight means the stereotypical Black man is ready to get aggressive and do things. Advocating is a more appropriate word, because that means a concern about what is going on for your child, not that you're going to have the police called on you.
So let me ask this question too, just in fairness sake, we know, so we kind of talked about women weaponizing the children. Do we do that as well?
Mm-hmm. It's possible, but this is an individual trait. This is not really about sex. This is about how do you deal with conflict. I was in a relationship for 7 years, have 2 kids out of that. I understand that my children love their other parent. I didn't like the ground that they walked on for about a year or 2, but that was our issues. And we were wise enough to know, hey, these kids, they deserve our best. So we will be together when it's necessary. We spent some holidays together. We had, Thanksgiving together. But the focus was the children, because we decided that we're over. There's no chance for us, but these kids are here. And we knew that whatever we do, it will impact them. And it has, because now we're friends, but they love their parent. And if something happens to me, I have to know that they're secure. I have to know that their mindset is secure. So it was very intentional. But it isn't easy, but it has to be intentional and on both sides. So one person can't be the quote unquote nice guy while someone is being the mean girl. It'll never work that way.
Yeah. Well, I know that Dwayne and Kenny both probably have questions for the experts here. So I'm going to let that happen. Let's start with Kenny. I see Kenny's here on the stage. Kenny, what questions would you have for our experts here as it pertains to your situation?
Yeah, I have reason to believe in my situation. Narcissism is a huge part of it. I could go down a checklist of all the things that checks out with my belief that this individual suffers from a narcissism personality disorder. I guess my question would be, in a situation like this, it's highly contentious. What should be my approach moving forward? And it's pretty much a situation where we're still litigating in court. I'm divorcing her. She's very upset about it. My main concern is Ariella. She's very young, but the mother refuses to co-parent. There's just not much I'm getting from her. She has completely stonewalled me, which again I believe is rooted in narcissism. So moving forward, what should be my approach in dealing with her?
So let me say first, one of the first things I tell fathers in our weekly programming, and I would say if you don't have a group of people who are positive towards empowering fathers, because you can get in other groups and they will push you in another way and you end up like that guy in Maryland who killed the baby mom and the mother, because you don't have any. This is many men take on this concept that this is them only one going through this. And it's not until they have a group of people that they can speak to, and not just the people on the bad side, people also on the good side that tell you, hey, how successful their marriage has been and how they were able to work it out and how they'll be able to deal with their partner in the way they have it. But one of the big things we have to do first as men is acknowledge that it is us who have to be, as we would say in cliche terms, be the bigger person. And I know it's hard because in this aspect, we don't have any power.
Yeah.
Our control over the situation. So you're almost saying, hey, why do I have to be the bigger person when everything, the system seems completely against me?
Yeah.
Because listen, if we're not the bigger person, our children are going to suffer because the mother, if she has control, if she has the system working for her, she can make the narrative along with the system in our society that you are bad or that you don't care or anything can go. And sometimes you have to begin to show a whole nother dynamic of yourself to change what happens in that system. And it's and again, brother, I'm not saying this cavalier.
No, I get it.
You got to do this,
no,
but it's very clear that we have to try to take on a lot of the responsibility and accountability of what has happened. Even in my own case, I have to take the accountability. I had sex with a woman, and I didn't want to have a child with her. I didn't want to do anything with her, but I had sex with her, and so I'm responsible now. I can't go and say, "Oh, she trapped me. She did this." I have to just take on, and I have to deal with the outcome of an idea or a promise that she thought that would happen because of this child. See, I hear you say, I'm gonna ask you this question, brother, honestly. When did you decide to get married to this young lady?
Yeah, I decided to get married to her after she got pregnant.
When you check the statistics, a large majority of us as men make this idea to be the good guy.
Yeah.
That we have a baby with somebody, now we're going to be a good guy. A lot of guys say, I ain't doing none of that. But a lot of us have good nature, good heart, and we agree to do it. And then we go into a relationship with a person that we know that's not going to work, but we think we can make it work for the child. And a lot of times we end up in this kind of situation that you find yourself in now, where your peace is not worth that relationship.
Yeah.
And you can be more harmful to your child, stay in that relationship than if you was just to get out. And then you kind of have to suffer not having your child. And that's a very hard thing for many fathers. Now, and I say largely Black fathers. I won't say it's not across the board, but Black fathers exclusively have this issue because the system doesn't really work for them in the same capacity it works for other fathers.
So this is how parental alienation happens, right? All that you guys have discussed. This is how we get to the point of parental alienation. One of the brothers mentioned earlier that about the makeup, the young lady that he was with. She talked about how when her mom died at 16, she wasn't gonna let anyone else hurt them. And now I'm hearing more about this situation where you get someone pregnant, so you want to do the right thing, and then that turns things, sour eventually. So let's speak to that some more. I know Dwayne has some questions too. So let's speak to that more, that parental alienation, and how do we identify, how do we know it's really happening? And, when we see it happening, what do we do?
Sure. Well, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. First, I want to thank you two as experts, because what really happened in my life was after we went through the breakup, I found it very paramount. I don't think in the Black community we do it enough, is I seeked out counseling and therapy. Because to avoid going back to what you were saying, Greer, about the alienation, is if you don't heal yourself and take time to correct what was wrong, what the trauma that you sustained, I think that triggers more parental alienation. Because if you just move on with life, again, we're Black men, so typically it's easier for us to find relationships than it is for women to find relationships, truth be told, even though we bounce around, unfortunately, but it is easier just because of the sheer numbers. There are more of single available Black men than there are single available Black women. Less. So for me, it was to find some counseling to heal, and then I could now deal with the paramount situation, which was the children, more so than having animosity towards her.
Well, so I like to chime in after you said the numbers and that men do have a higher chance of finding a relationship. That doesn't mean that we should if we're not ready. So just because we can doesn't mean we should. So I think that the therapy for those who First of all, we should recognize our own patterns, because the patterns that we've adopted and we've normalized, that influences our choices in our mates. So from this experience, and for both of you, I would challenge you to somehow understand why you chose the person you chose.
Yeah.
So is it totally them, or is it things, as you said, but there was a big red flag that you didn't address? That's ownership, because that was a huge red flag. Because what I hear happened is, so when you left her, that was another form of hurt. So so for her, that hurt turned into vengeance, because she's hurt again, because she told you she wouldn't let anybody else hurt her. So what she determines as hurt may not be hurt in your eyes, but to her is hurt. So moving forward, any red flags or warning signs should be talked about, because unless you're in NASCAR, we should not have a box of flags just sitting in our bedroom. There's absolutely no reason. It's not decoration. It can save your life. It can literally save your life. But I want to talk about how we understand this happening. Well, first of all, it's a form of child abuse. It's a form of emotional abuse towards a child. And so there's like 4 or 5 things that we can look at to see if a child or even a family is experiencing this form of alienation. So the first thing is, so when the child starts to avoid the parent, or when the child starts to change their attitude towards the parent that's being alienated. And the second thing is, if there was a prior established healthy relationship there before, and that's changed, that's also another indicator. And also number 3, if there's absence of any form of neglect or abuse, if there's accusations that are also unproven, and then number 4, we can see that the parent is doing things to purposely alienate the child, such as holding the child back from their visits, or trying in some way to control what their child thinks of their parents. So when we see those things happening, we can identify that, and then we can start to work on that. And usually it's in the case of family therapy, because not only does the child need therapy, but also the offending parent needs to understand how their behavior is affecting their child, and also to get under the root of why both parents are not on the same page. So it would really take strong family therapy. But the last thing I want to say is, so we talk about the system. So for all fathers out there who are going through this, if you're trying to find an attorney to work with you, find one who is passionate about Black families. So for me, I work in mental health, but my passion is trauma. I don't deal with a lot of other things. So if I'm passionate about that, then I'm going to give you my love for what I do. So in that case, if you're looking for an attorney, don't just look in the phone book. Find someone who is passionate about family structure. Find someone who may have had experience with what you're going through, because the system may be geared against this, but it's your attorney that speaks for you. It's your attorney that advocates for your rights. So if they're passionate about what they believe for you, and it's not just a paycheck for them, you'll have a better outcome, because you can't talk to the judge. That's what they're for. So find your own advocate. Find someone that wants to make sure that you're taken care of as well.
Yeah. So, hey, Cory, let me ask you this. That was really excellent. That everything you just said. So my question for you is this: if you're me and you're in this system, right? How do I get the court to bring in family therapists to help us?
That would be the attorney. That would be the attorney. Again, if that attorney is passionate about that subject and is knowledgeable, that's their language. That's your advocate in court. So it's your job to bring it up if you feel it's important, but it's your attorney who can talk that language in the court system. So again, it goes back to who was your advocate? Who was your advocate? Because as you advocate for your rights, someone has to speak the language for you, because you can't.
Right.
So it goes back to you picking, it goes back to you finding that advocate that will work for what you deserve.
Well, let me lift up this comment because we talk about Black fathers and what Black fathers have done and try to do when it comes to their children. David E. Kelly, he says, I got out but suffered because of the lopsided justice system and the lies that my ex told my children. However, I moved 1,800 miles to Arizona, 2 blocks away from her house, to be closer to my children because she moved them out of state 2 months after our separation. I became a teacher in their school district, but she told them to tell their friends that I was dead, even while I was trying to be the father I was supposed to be. However, I made my boys state champion football players. How about that? You know, again, and it's not to cast any disparaging tone toward Black women, because we know Black women are they are, you know, the stronghold of our community. They're the backbone of our community. But this is amazing when you're thinking about Black fathers.
But let me say this, because this is something that we have to really, like, you know, when we have conversations, when women have conversations like this, not very often is somebody on a panel going to say what I'm about to say. We have to really validate what women feel. Understand that women are different from men in their emotionality. We can bypass a lot of stuff. We don't take things a certain way. Whereas in many instances, especially based on their family structure, family background, what love, insecurities, power, influences, if they lived in a patriarchy, if they live in a matriarchy, those things have a big role to play in how they deal with difficult situations. And having a child and losing the father, and the relationship ends, has a major role in how a woman will respond and act afterwards. There's some women who will say, okay, this doesn't work, and let's try to find a way to work out that this is not happening. But for many of them, especially if they haven't been given the love, I feel like the love they needed, you have broken that love promise. You were the person that was supposed to be what their father didn't give them, or what they hadn't got from their mother, or what they hadn't got from different people. And now you have did the same thing. And I know it doesn't seem right, but you have to understand, hurt people, and when they're hurting, they don't do anything good for the other person or other people. So we have to, you know, it's a strong thing that we have to, and I say this all the time, and I know it's not fair for you to have to take that and say, oh, let me work better than that. But if you want the best for your children, that's the way to advocate, to understand the context of the situation that you're in at this moment.
And let's say for men, because I want to say this too, men, we are not responsible for what someone's parents didn't do for them. We're not. We go into this, so we go into these things, you know, with our chest out, saying, I'm going to save you, you know, because as a man, I think, and my role is to protect and serve. Your role is to show up the best way you can, so you can be supportive of where they are, and also identify that if where they are is healthy for you. And it's also your responsibility. That woman is not responsible for what your mother or father didn't do or did do towards you.
Right.
So that's why I always say, before I date, I take my own list of things as, you know, even at 48, what have I not worked on since the last time? So I'm responsible. So when I go into this new thing, I am fully responsible. I am a full person. I am happy without you. I am happy. I am good before you came along. The only thing that you can do is add to that. But I'm not going to suck the life out of you because I didn't have one before you came along. So it's very important that we know who we are, why we got married, because it sounds like in most cases, you guys are trying to do the right thing, you know, obviously. But to what extent are we sacrificing who we are to save someone else?
Yeah, well, we're unfortunately running really out of time. We got about 1 minute to go, so I'm going to let the two gentlemen, the Black fathers, Kenny and Dwayne, give a 30 seconds on a summation on what you gather from our experts today.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys for definitely coming on. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate that. I think the biggest thing I've gotten from the entire panel today is that, you know, we're all accountable for our actions. You know, I didn't come on here to, you know, bash anybody. What's most important to me is my child. What's most important is that she knows her father. Everybody born into this world deserves a mother and a father. And as a man, understanding why I am in this situation starts with me. So I didn't come on to bash anybody. I came on here because I love my daughter and I wanted answers. I wanted to talk to some people who understand me, and I've learned so much. And I want to thank all of you guys for having me on today. Thank you, Stacey.
Well, we thank you, and hang out a little bit after we go off the air. We can just have a quick discussion with the panel, and perhaps that will add to any assistance we can give. Go ahead, Dwayne.
I mean, I want to concur with Kenny as well, or Kendrick. You guys have been insightful. I want to thank you, Stacey, for hosting, giving us a voice, and allowing us to just tell our story. I think what happens is when the story is put out there, people can now take from it, learn from it, and grow from it. So I've definitely grown. I've definitely learned how to process, how to even be more selective, and what to do in relationships that I move forward in going forward in my life. So again, thank you very much for allowing me to be here and letting my story be told.
Well, we appreciate you guys being so open to tell your story. It's not an easy one to tell. We understand that. And we understand that as some who have written in that there are two sides to every story. And believe me, trust us, we do want to hear from the women as well. But this is an issue. This is an ongoing issue in the Black community. It's in other communities, but we have to take care of home first. And 1.2 million Black families now, kids, they're growing up without both parents in the household. This is a public issue, a public health issue, if you will. And these brothers will say a mental health issue. So we need to talk about it. And we're going to continue to talk about it. So stay tuned and join us. We will see you tomorrow.